The cameras flashed against the marble columns of the White House as I stood at the north gate, waiting my turn in line. Put that invitation away before someone sees you holding it like it means something, my father said, glancing at the plain card in my hand. Go home. Vivian. Call a cab. Don't embarrass this family tonight. I didn't argue. I stepped up to the podium and handed the hostess my credentials. When her scanner beeped, the color drained from her face. She turned to a 4-star general standing a few feet away, her voice shaking. Sir. She's here. The general turned, saw me, and snapped to attention. Good evening, Director. We've been expecting you. My father's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. My name is Vivian Sloan. I'm 34 years old. And for most of my adult life, my own family treated me like a rounding error. They thought I was a low-level government employee who answered phones for a living. Before I tell you how their whole world came apart in one evening, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And let me know if you've ever had to sit at a table with people who underestimated you completely. 3 weeks earlier, I stood behind my father, Gerald, in the VIP security line, surrounded by senators, lobbyists, and Secret Service agents. He straightened his tuxedo jacket every few seconds, making sure the right people noticed him. Beside him stood my brother, Preston, and his wife, Camille. Camille wore a gown that probably cost more than what she assumed my annual salary was. Are you actually trying to walk in with us? Camille asked, loud enough for the people around us to hear. This is a state dinner, not a cafeteria. Preston laughed. Let her dream. Camille. She probably wants to see what a real career looks like up close. For years they'd assumed I was a mid-level contractor pushing paperwork somewhere inside a federal building. When I told them I worked in defense, my father had nodded absently and gone back to talking about his firm. He never asked what I actually did. I never offered. Secrecy had simply become the shape of my life. My father turned and blocked my path. I'm not doing this tonight. Vivian, he said. My firm is finalizing a $450 million defense contract. We're sitting at the primary table. I will not have you trailing behind us like you belong here. You weren't invited. Go home. I looked at the gold-trimmed card in his hand. It was worth nothing compared to the one in my coat pocket. I'm not here with you, I said quietly. I'm here for work. Camille laughed sharply. Work? What are you going to do? Reboot someone's laptop. They moved ahead of me toward the podium. The hostess, a composed woman with a tablet and an earpiece, greeted them warmly, scanned my father's invitation, and waved them through the metal detectors. My father shot one last satisfied look over his shoulder. Goodbye. Vivian, he mouthed. I stepped up to the podium. The hostess looked at my plain black dress and simple flats, and her smile thinned. I'm sorry. This entrance is reserved for VIP guests, she said. I didn't argue. I reached into my coat and set a matte black credential on the podium. Scan it, I said. She sighed, clearly humoring me, and ran the scanner over the card. It let out a sharp beep. Her monitor flashed red, overriding the guest list entirely, and her hands started to shake. That's when she called for the general. That's when he saluted me. That's when my family, still waiting at the metal detectors, turned around and watched their invisible daughter get escorted past every checkpoint in the building. Exactly 1 week before that night, I sat at my parents' dining table in McLean, Virginia. While candlelight flickered over a roast my mother had spent all day preparing. My brother Preston leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of scotch like he'd already won something. It's basically signed, he announced. $450 million. The Department of Defense is handing us the keys. Camille clapped, her rings catching the light. We're finally going to close on that place in Vale. Preston can't keep flying commercial. It's beneath us now. My mother, Diane, beamed at them. You two make it look easy. It's not easy, my father said. cutting his meat with precision. It's about knowing which hands to shake and which pockets to fill. We beat out 3 other firms for this. I said nothing. They were talking about the Horizon Grid, the military's next-generation encrypted communications system. A program I had personally flagged as a critical national security risk 2 months earlier. They had no idea the woman sitting across the table held the authority to kill their contract with a single signature. Camille turned to me with a look of practiced pity. So, Vivian, how's the basement treating you? Still fixing printers for generals? I don't work in a basement, I said evenly. I work in a secure facility. Whatever you call it, she said, waving a hand. What do they even pay you? 70,000. Preston spends more than that on a watch. Leave your sister alone, my mother said, in the tone people use when they don't actually mean it. Not everyone is built for real success. My father pointed his fork at me. You could have joined the firm. Learned from your brother. Instead, you chose to be a government employee your whole life. That's your decision to live with. I'd rather serve my country than sell it, I said. The table went silent for exactly 2 seconds before Camille scoffed. She's jealous. It's sad. Honestly, this is why she never gets invited anywhere. She wouldn't know how to talk to anyone that matters. I sat with that for a moment, then picked up my water glass and said nothing else. Under the table, my smartwatch standard issue. Department encrypted was already recording every word. By dessert. My father slid a thick folder across the table toward me. Inside was a property transfer agreement for my late grandfather's farmhouse in upstate Pennsylvania, the one piece of land he'd left entirely to me. Specifically because he didn't trust my father with it. Sign it, my father said. I have a notary in the next room. Why do you need my inheritance? I asked. When you're bragging about a $450 million contract. Preston leaned forward like he was explaining something to a child. A deal this size doesn't happen because of a good pitch. Vivian, there are costs. Facilitation fees. We need clean collateral. Completely disconnected from the firm. To secure financing from a foreign partner. Your grandfather's land is unencumbered. Perfect vehicle. You want to use my grandfather's home to fund bribes. I said plainly. It's a loan. Preston snapped. We pay it back within 6 months. Once the government funding lands, no one will ever know. And if the deal collapses, if your foreign partner seizes it, it won't collapse. Camille said. We have the head table at the White House dinner next week. The president is announcing it personally. My father slammed his hand on the table. You owe this family. Vivian. I fed you. I paid for your degree. You've lived in the shadow of what we built. Sign the document. I set down the pen he'd placed in front of me. I'm not signing this, I said. I won't hand you my grandfather's home to fund a federal crime. The explosion that followed was immediate. Preston called me an ungrateful failure. Camille told me I'd always been the weak link. That I took and gave nothing back. My mother cried into her napkin about everything they'd sacrificed for me. My father stood, adjusted his jacket, and delivered his verdict in a voice gone cold and quiet. You have until midnight to sign, he said, or you're finished in this family. No calls. No holidays. Nothing. You'll be erased. Then, almost as punishment, he opened the safe behind him and pulled out 4 cream envelopes stamped with the presidential seal. I fought for a 5th ticket to that dinner, he said. For you. I was going to let you stand near real power for one night. He looked at the 4th envelope, then handed it, deliberately, to Camille's mother instead. She understands class. You clearly don't. I stood, put on my coat, and walked out without another word. What they didn't see, on my way to the door, was my brother's work laptop, sitting open and unlocked on the living room credenza, the same laptop he'd been using to review Horizon Grid files before dinner. He was too arrogant to think anyone in his own family was a threat. I didn't break stride. A device no larger than a fingernail slid into the port as I passed. 12 seconds later, Every file on that machine belonged to me. Back in my own apartment that night, not a cheap one-bedroom, but a secure residence very few people had ever seen. I opened the cloned data. My brother's digital habits were as careless as his mouth. Wire transfers routed through shell companies in the Caymans. Consulting retainers that were, in plain language, bribes to 2 mid-level Pentagon procurement officers. But buried in a hidden partition was something worse. A modified build of the Horizon Grid source code, exchanged over encrypted email with a shell company based overseas, a known front for a foreign intelligence operation. The code contained a deliberate blind spot in our early warning missile detection system. 14 minutes wide. 14 minutes where an adversary could move against this country without tripping a single alarm. My father and brother weren't just committing fraud. They were selling out their own country's defense grid for a payout and a taste of status. I found a video file dated 3 months earlier, a hotel meeting overseas. My brother's voice on the recording. Casual and confident. My sister works somewhere, low level, in defense. We use her name on the compliance paperwork to speed things through. She has no idea. If anyone ever asks questions, all roads lead back to her. Not us. They weren't only willing to sell their country, they were willing to let it destroy me in the process. I picked up a secure line and called the one person I trusted with what I'd found, General Marcus Ellison, my closest counterpart at the Pentagon. I need a joint task force, I told him. F.B. Justice Department. Full mobilization. I have evidence of bribery, fraud, and a compromised defense program tied directly to a foreign intelligence operation. And the people responsible will be sitting at the White House state dinner next week. There was a pause on the line. Understood. Director, we'll be ready. For the next several days, I barely slept. I worked with federal investigators to build an airtight case. Verify the cryptographic signatures tying my brother directly to the modified code, and map out exactly how the operation at the dinner would unfold. Every detail had to be flawless. My family was well connected. One misstep and they'd slip away behind a wall of lawyers and favors. On the night of the dinner, I arrived at the North Gate exactly as planned. My family, having stolen the 5th ticket for Camille's mother, walked past me in line, laughing when my credentials cleared, and General Ellison saluted me in front of half of Washington. Their laughter stopped cold. There's been a mistake. My father sputtered to the security detail. This is my daughter. She works help desk. She doesn't belong back here. The lead agent didn't even look at him. Move them to secondary screening, I said calmly. I don't know these people. They were escorted, humiliated, into a glass-walled holding area while photographers captured every second of it. I walked past them without turning my head and made my way into the grand ballroom. 45 minutes later, once they'd been cleared and seated at their table, the chief of staff took the podium. Tonight, we rely on the integrity of one individual to protect this nation's digital defense, he announced. It is my honor to yield this podium to the Director of National Cybersecurity. I stood from the head table and walked toward the stage. I watched my father's champagne glass slip from his hand and shatter across the tablecloth. I watched my brother's mouth fall open. I watched Camille drop her phone. At the podium, I addressed the room. Tonight, we were scheduled to finalize the Horizon Grid contract, I said. Instead, I'm here to tell you that this contract is permanently terminated. Under my authority, on the grounds of the Espionage Act. The evidence you're about to see proves a deliberate act of bribery, fraud, and treason against the United States. The screens behind me lit up with the evidence, the wires, the modified code, the recorded conversation of my own brother, explaining how he planned to frame me if anyone ever found out. The doors burst open. Federal agents moved through the ballroom in seconds. My father was pulled from his chair and handcuffed against the very table he'd once used to threaten me. My brother tried to run and was tackled before he reached the exit. Camille's assets were frozen on the spot, her jewelry seized as proceeds of federal crimes. My father collapsed at the foot of the stage, begging me to make it stop. insisting we were family. Insisting I owed him loyalty. You told me a week ago that I was erased from this family. I said, loud enough for the room to hear. I'm only following your instructions. I'm not your daughter anymore. Tonight. I'm just doing my job. The agents pulled him away. The doors closed. The ballroom was silent. In the months that followed, my brother pled guilty rather than face trial, and is serving a life sentence without parole. My father was convicted on more than 30 counts of fraud, bribery, and treason. Camille was indicted separately for tax fraud tied to the hidden payments. My mother lost everything the family had built, and now lives alone in a small apartment. Estranged from the friends who once filled her calendar, I didn't do any of this out of hatred. I did it because the country I serve matters more than a family that only valued me the moment they needed something from me. 6 months later, I stood on a balcony overlooking the city at night, a glass of champagne in my hand, finally free of the weight I'd carried since childhood, the constant, quiet ache of trying to be enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. If you've ever been the disappointing one in a family that only respects money and status, I want you to hear this. Their inability to see your worth was never proof that you lacked it. Sometimes the people who make you feel smallest are the ones most threatened by what you'd become if you ever stopped shrinking for them. You don't have to explode to prove your value. You just have to stop begging for a seat at a table that was never going to make room for you and start building your own. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from people who underestimated you completely? I'd love to hear your story.